more of what some are calling a green learning agenda. Will the global education community be able to teach children and give them the needed tools to battle climate change, hurricanes, floods, drought, and food shortages? Hello, I'm Orion Itangishaka. On today's program, we will look at the damage being caused by not taking care of our planet. We will hear from experts on what can be done in education systems around the world without forgetting, of course, the focus on women and girls. Let's begin by looking at some of the negative effects of climate change in the United States, as a group of scientists several years ago shared insights on how human activities in the last 100 years have played a major role in it.
Seed isn't even any moisture.
Well, the Earth's climate has been changing over millions of years, but we've never seen this much change over 100 years. So we're living in a warmer world, we're living in a melting world, we're living in a world where sea levels are rising.
The fact is that the warming we are seeing now in recent decades is human-caused. It's not natural. If it weren't for human activities, the world, under natural causes like changes in the sun and volcanoes, would have actually cooled slightly in recent decades, and yet it's been warming. And the warming is due to human activities, primarily to carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping gases and particles that mankind has put into the atmosphere. We're using the atmosphere as a free dump for the waste products of an energy system based on coal and oil and natural gas, and that is causing the planet to warm up. We're quite sure of that.
And so the thing that worries me the most is not the next 1,000 years or the next ice age, but the next 100 years.
How can we best teach our children, who are the future of our planet, to protect it and to care for it? I spoke to psychologist and daycare principal in Burundi, Dr. Nibaruta Mediatrice, who gave us several tips on how to do just that.
Teaching kids to protect the environment is to model a lifestyle of protecting the environment, showing them that it is not good to throw things around that cannot decompose, showing them that they must preserve water when washing their hands, turning off lights after leaving the room. We have to help them to come in contact with the environment and understand exactly what is in our environment, what is its importance, why do we need to protect it.
Now, what are some other academic instructions, some of the courses that you give to these children at your daycare, at Winter School, in your curriculum?
We teach children using the theory of multiple intelligence and naturalist intelligence. We teach them how to protect everything that is around us in our everyday life. We teach them, for example, that they must not destroy flowers, that after eating cookies, they must not throw the wrappings just anywhere, and to be aware of their surroundings. At our school at the moment, we plant certain plants and show them from the moment it is still a seed, when it begins to sprout, all the way to the time it is ready to be eaten. Recently, we growed some corn and fed them after they had seen the process of how they were planted and grew. They found them delicious. Kids need to be put in real environments and then given multiple kinds of experiences. Together, you study each thing and gain experience of its importance. Together, you go in the sun and feel the burn. You go in the shade together and feel how wonderful it feels. That is how it is with children. You instill in them the love of the environment at a young age and teach them its importance.
Now, what is missing in the academic systems of schools, mostly public schools, especially on the continent, for the environmental courses or things that are related to climate change, and in order for them to be more and to be seen more in curriculums.
What is missing is the right perception of children. Kids are often seen as people who aren't ready to know things yet, people who are not accountable for anything. But if you want a child to be that person who will one day do things right, you must teach it to them at a very young age. Things have to progress from what he once heard to what is the reality in his own personal and everyday life. So often the problem is that people want to teach topics of environmental protection to a grown adult who already has habits and manners that are not correct and often contrary to environmental preservation, and that becomes an issue. But if you start teaching a child at about 1.5 years, things will be innate, and they will never want to cut a tree down. Even when they see someone cutting a tree down, they will tell them, stop. And once you tell them, for instance, if you throw things in the lake Tanganyika, the fishes will die and you won't have fish to eat. They will say, because of the trash? I was surprised recently when we took a trip to the lake and the kids said, Madam, there are no more fish. There is too much trash. I really understood that what we have taught them has become integrated in their lives in a way that they were shocked to see trash in the lake.
How are they receptive? How do they receive the teachings about the environment that they live in?
They are very receptive. When you are teaching children about the environment, they receive it exactly the way you teach it to them, because they have no other preconceived notions or information. They take it at face value and they live by it. Our other objective is to stimulate their interests, because we know that they will go in different fields or work later in life. They will become agricultural engineers, biologists, archaeologists, and many other fields, because nature is so full of wonderful things like beautiful animals, young plants, old plants, etc. And so we see children so happy and excited.
Dr. Nibaruta shares with us a video they produced at their school of children singing how to protect the environment. Take a look.
Qu'allons-nous faire pour protéger la planète Terre?
Je vais planter les arbres. Je ferme le robinet pour avoir la belle main. J'éteins la lumière quand je sors de ma chambre. Il ne faut pas jeter les saletés dans le lac.
Pourquoi?
Il y aura plus de poissons à manger. Les hippopotames, les crocodiles vont mourir.
Et d'autres êtres vivants qui s'y trouvent vont disparaître. Je vais transformer les objets en plastique pour avoir
des jouets, des babouches, des assiettes, des gobelets. Quand je vais à la toilette, j'utilise convenablement au papier hygiénique.
Parce que gaspiller le papier hygiénique, c'est gaspiller les arbres.
Car c'est la vie, c'est la vie. C'est la vie, c'est la vie. C'est la vie, c'est la vie. La vie en est bonne. Car c'est la vie, c'est la vie. C'est la vie, c'est la vie. C'est la vie, c'est la vie. La vie en est bonne.
It is time to take a break. What method is your school system using to teach children how to preserve our planet? Please share your tips on our social media pages. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle is at VOA Our Voices. We are also on WhatsApp. Our number is on the bottom of your screen. When we return, we will look at what some high school students in the West are doing to preserve our environment. We will also hear from gender education and climate change specialist Christina Kwok about the important intersection between girls' education and climate action. Stay with us.
Empowerment and humanity towards a better world.
Economic and social progress of every society.
Facts and information from key players rather than spectators in politics, business, science, and technology.
City, rural, educated, or underprivileged. We care and we listen to what matters to you.
Your voices are our voices.
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. Today we're discussing the vital need for children and youth to learn how to preserve our ecosystem. For many young people, climate change can spur conflicting emotions, fear, hopelessness that it is all too late, a sense of urgency to do something. VOA Jolie Tabo spoke to a few young people about their concerns for the fate of the planet.
These young students are picking up litter and removing garlic mustard in a wooded park in Washington, D.C. Removing invasive species helps native plants flourish, and the students say they feel like they're contributing in a small way to a healthier planet.
I want other people, even like generations from now, to be able to have like the same experiences I've gotten to have in Rock Creek.
A recent report by a United Nations panel predicts that the planet is heading toward environmental catastrophe if governments don't take immediate drastic action to curtail climate change. The bracing headlines about Earth's future are contributing to what some experts call eco-anxiety, or climate change distress, found especially among the young. Some feel there is little they can do. Others feel spurred to action.
I think I, like a lot of people in my generation, we're really afraid right now, and it's really easy to feel helpless.
But Amelia counters that helpless feeling by volunteering regularly at the park.
I chose to do this because it felt like something that I could do that was tangible, that was a way of actually helping the environment, of helping my community.
Nearly half of young people between the ages of 16 and 25 say anxiety about climate change negatively affects their daily lives, according to a recent global survey in the medical journal, The Lancet.
We're seeing the impacts of drought, the impacts of extreme heat in cities, the impacts on agriculture and food shortages. But what I'm finding is that more and more people, especially young people, have the temerity to say, there's solutions we know that we can do to reduce some of the impacts of climate change and to help us adapt. And we can't do nothing.
A common message by the experts is to take small actions in your own life to reduce your carbon footprint.
You can do something as simple as meatless Mondays. Switch to a plant-based diet. If you can walk somewhere, then walk. Reduce, recycle, and reuse is a concept that's really coming about.
Becoming politically active is another way young people can address their eco-anxiety, like Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg.
We need to focus every inch of our being on climate change.
For youth to see someone like Greta having an impact that she's having and people actually listening to her and politicians listening to her really does bring about hope.
We're going to grab our trash bags and we're going to walk around the edge of the park to pick up litter.
Lindsay Cathcart of the Rock Creek Conservancy, who leads the group, says meeting with others to do community cleanups like this one helps the local environment, but is beneficial to the overall well-being of the students as well.
So there are certainly these big picture issues that the young people can't turn a switch and fix. So doing this work has a very quick, tangible impact that affects the emotional and environmental health of the students and of the overall ecosystem.
Julie Tabo, VOA News, Washington.
Thanks, Julie. Now, my co-host Amina Ndimiake and Simingesh and I talked with Christina Kwok, gender education and climate change specialist at the University of Minnesota and our former Brookings Institute expert, about major global climate action that are needed to reverse some of the impact of climate change, especially with what she calls a green learning agenda.
In that same report, the new green learning agenda, you explain at least what some of the basics an education system should have. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? What are these basics?
Sure. So I think it's first important to recognize that a new green learning agenda is proposing an alternative way of thinking about education in a time of climate crisis to help achieve unfettered economic growth. And so a new green learning agenda is aimed to transform that education system into one that is in service of life on the planet. So this means centering learning that addresses the intersections of social well-being and planetary health, which requires centering learning in alternative economic thinking and really developing self and social and ecological awareness alongside the skills to engage in things like radical acts of care. environmental stewardship, compassionate governance. So if you think about in climate speak, a new green learning agenda is really about increasing learners' climate resilience and their adaptive capacity by building sustainability competencies that are really necessary to bring about our social ecological systems change and all within planetary boundaries.
I've seen some of your work with the Brooklyn Institute that suggests that girls' education can strengthen climate change related solutions. Can you tell us more about how girls' empowerment is linked to implementation of climate change strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. So we understand from the data and from research that girls and women in low and middle income country contexts experience the negative impacts of climate change in very disproportionate and negative ways. But we also know that investing in girls' education can be a really powerful part of the solution in three particular ways. And so I'll start off with the first one, and that's investing in gender empowering transformative education for both girls and boys, where girls and boys learn about their rights, including their right to bodily autonomy and their right to quality education, and how that can enable girls then to stay in school longer. And when this is coupled with access to voluntary rights-based family planning, the impact of girls' education is to delay premature transitions to adulthood by delaying marriage and delaying the start of childbearing. And we know from research that when girls and women have control over their own reproductive lives, they're better able to raise smaller, healthier, and more sustainable families. Second, investing in girls' education as a climate solution means developing a broad breadth of green skills to be able to take part in green jobs that will fuel the transition to a more sustainable economy. And without these skills, girls and women will remain at the edges of the green economy, just as they have been at the edges of our brown fossil fuel driven economy. And we know that the sectors that will take off first because of increased political interest in them for green transitions are the same sectors that tend to be male dominated, sectors in STEM fields, your science, technology, engineering, and math fields. And then the third way is as a means of ensuring girls have the opportunity to develop and exercise their leadership skills so that they can engage in climate decision-making that'll help them and their families reduce their unique climate risks and their climate vulnerabilities. And they're better able to adapt to the economic and the environmental shocks because they're better able to plan for, cope with, and rebound from climate crises.
Obviously, you've dedicated a lot of time and research to this project. So what is your recommendation on more of what can be done for the global education community to focus on climate action with the young people around the world? Have the UN or other global agencies looked at promoting this agenda?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. The UN and other agencies have definitely attempted to address education in the context of the climate crisis, all the way back from the 90s and even before then as well, with Education for Sustainable Development. But I think what we've seen, and a lot of research has demonstrated this, is that a lot of those previous efforts haven't reached their transformative potential. We realize as a global education community and brought more broadly that the most impactful way to education, or the most impactful way to climate action, is through education, and through education of more sustainable mindsets, beliefs, attitudes, and worldviews. These sorts of ways of being and seeing in the world help us then unlock the extent of political actions that are needed, as well as the technical solutions that we need to be able to then adopt climate mitigation strategies at scale. And I think, one of the big roadblocks is that the global education community first needs to see itself as a climate stakeholder. And this means at the most basic level to begin integrating gender empowering climate change education inside classrooms, and to begin making schoolyards and school buildings more climate resilient and greener. When you're thinking about content and context within the classroom, thinking about building the technical knowledge and the skills that are required for women and men to participate equally in sustainable greener industries. So think, for example, women's participation in climate resilient agriculture or climate smart agriculture. Another way that our new green learning agenda positions forward is really thinking about orienting more generic knowledge, generic skills and attitudes towards more sustainable behaviors. So this is like pivoting critical thinking, problem solving, communication, and so on, towards understanding the root drivers and the multitude of solutions for the climate crisis.
What is your recommendation on what governments can focus on in terms of maybe in the education system or in the culture settings that can promote the agenda, the green learning agenda that you're talking about?
Yes, I mean, the first most basic move that governments in Africa should do is really focus on ensuring that there's opportunities to learn about climate change, learn about climate crisis, develop the language and the knowledge around what these causes are, what the impacts are. The Afrobarometer just recently put out a study, the first study to my knowledge, of climate change education or climate change awareness, within the African context. And those percentages are far lower in comparison to the polls and studies that have been conducted elsewhere. So I think this speaks to the real need to ensure that schools are teaching about climate change. They're teaching about climate justice. They're teaching about climate action, because communities, especially those that are on the front lines of the climate crisis, are experiencing the impacts of climate change today. They see it, they feel it, they understand it, but they don't have the language to talk about it or the language to advocate for solutions, community solutions, system solutions. So I think the number one thing to do, the number one thing that African countries can do today is to ensure that young people are learning about the climate crisis and understanding their role in addressing it.
It's time for another quick break. Here at Our Voices, we've been watching a few young ladies on the continent taking the lead in impressive climate action. When we come back, my colleague Seminyesh Yakoye will introduce you to them in our Women to Watch segment. Stay with us.
On VOA Our Voices, women are using their voices to empower,
to nurture,
to educate,
to stand up in any language.
Amajgriyachu,
Dimsachen,
Murioyamu,
Mazwielu.
Our Voices.
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. It's time for our Women to Watch segment with Seminyesh Yakoye.
Thanks, Orion, and hello, everyone. I'm happy to bring you this week's Women to Watch segment. Today, we introduce two young women who are actively putting the planet first by campaigning about climate change among their peers. We begin with Brenda Mwele of the Green Girls platform based in Malawi. The 24-year-old serves as a program coordinator for the organization and helps to empower girls to be at the forefront as climate change negotiators. Brenda came up with different solutions to help girls remain in school and not let her future be affected by the challenges of climate change. The girls who join the Green Girls platform often see the organization as a club with activities such as tree planting, cleanup campaigns, and the use of solar energy, which is aimed at enhancing their leadership skills to make the right decisions regarding the environment. Brenda is also a part of the National Youth Network for Climate Change, which has helped her become a part of a team that advocates for full involvement of youth in different climate action platforms, including lobbying for laws to ban tin plastics. Another young woman demanding climate justice is a Kenyan teen, Ramina Pollitt. She protested in the streets of Nairobi last year ahead of the UN's COP26 summit to be proactive in protecting the planet, especially on the African continent.
Kenyan teenager Ramina Paulette holds a placard and chants climate justice into a microphone as she rallies around 50 young demonstrators for a peaceful march to defend their planet against climate change. Paulette's demonstration in the western Kenyan city of Kisumu is part of a global day of youth action against climate change, inspired by Sweden's Greta Thunberg. When she's not organizing protests, Paulette, who is in school, takes part in cleaning up Lake Victoria, which she says is polluted with plastics and discarded nappies.
This climate strike means a lot in terms of having an importance to our current life. Like right now, it's being determined and also tries to strategize on the food system, climate change crisis, and also the global issues that are affecting us.
Young people around the world are demanding urgent action to avert disastrous climate change. in the largest protest since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
My message to the older generations and the African leaders in regards to the climate strike is that we need to work together in terms of enhancing more future sustainable projects and having more eco-friendly business that won't be part of the people or even the initiatives that are increasing the carbon footprint in the atmosphere, which will lead to the global warming and climate change.
I'm so happy and proud of her because she's a hero on her very own, because many people are now doing environmental stuff because they're seeing a 15-year-old doing it. And as a mother, I feel so good.
Today we've luckily collected many tons of plastic waste and also other waste. So this also reflects on the idea of people not actually taking the proper waste management issue as serious. So we're trying to do the sensitization to the community in order for them to get the knowledge.
The strike took place 5 weeks before the UN COP26 summit, which aims to secure more ambitious climate change from world leaders to drastically cut the greenhouse gas emissions heating the planet. A landmark UN climate science report in August warned that human activity has already locked in climate disruptions for decades, but that rapid large-scale action to reduce emissions could still stave off some of the most destructive impacts. So far, governments do not plan to cut emissions anywhere near fast enough to do that. The United Nations said that countries' commitments would see global emissions increase to be 16% higher in 2030 than they were in 2010. Far off the 45% reduction by 2030 needed to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Do you know any other women who are inspiring children or the youth to protect the planet? Please let us know and leave your comments using the hashtag VOA Our Voices. Until next time, I am Simanish Koye.
Thanks, Simanish. Now that's it for us this week. To catch up on the latest episode of Our Voices, visit the VOA website at voanews.com or on YouTube. Special thanks to our guests, Dr. Nibaruta in Burundi and Mrs. Kwok in Minnesota, and of course my Our Voices co-host, Amina, Dimiake, and Simanish. And on behalf of everyone here at VOA, I am Orion Itangishaka. Have a wonderful day.